Okay, here we go. As soon as it comes up on our, there it is. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to continue our study on Jesus's trip to Rome. And tonight he's actually at Alexandria, and he's going to talk about some very important things. He's going to connect the physical life with the spiritual life, and how the physical life and our mortal life connects to the spiritual life, and how you really can't separate the two. They're both the same as one. All right, so we'll change the picture here. And Diane, will you take this first one?
Sure. 4. Discourse on reality. The night before they left Alexandria.
Yes.
Roger, would you mute you?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
We're getting reverberation.
Yeah, thank you.
I start over.
Yeah.
Okay. 4. Disclosure on reality. Discourse. What did I say? Let's start over again. 4. Discourse on reality. The night before they left Alexandria, Ganid and Jesus had a long visit with one of the government professors at the university who lectured on the teachings of Plato. Jesus interpreted for the learned Greek teacher, but injected no teaching of his own in refutation of Greek philosophy. Gonod was away on business that evening, so after the professor had departed, the teacher and his pupil had a long and heart-to-heart talk about Plato's doctrines. While Jesus gave qualified approval of some of the Greek teachings, which had to do with the theory that the material things of the world are shadowily reflections of invisible but more substantial spiritual realities, he sought to lay a more trustworthy foundation for the lad's thinking. So he began a long dissertation concerning the nature of reality in the universe. In substance and in modern phraseology, Jesus, thank you. Jesus said to Ganod.
Okay, I want to preface this tonight. These are some of the most important passages in the Urantia book. This is Jesus's concept of reality. I know everyone out there has heard me mention the 26-week course I taught twice now, and I just finished a book on it. It's going to be out probably next week on Amazon. But these are the things that book and those 26-week class came from. This is one of the things. And he discusses all the concepts with Ganid. Even though he's a 17-year-old boy, he probably only understood about 3% of it. But Jesus really goes into a long discussion about reality and what it is. Okay, and that's why we wanted to go over this really well. Let me go back up one paragraph for just 1 second here.
And it's interesting, the remark that the physical is a shadow of the spiritual.
And that's why I wanted to go back up to this. I don't know if you remember that when we talked about this in our class, that really everything physical is a reflection of what's in paradise. So paradise is the pattern for everything. And that's why all 700,000 creator sons try to make their local universes as close to paradise as they possibly can. And that's what Jesus is talking about here in just a second, that how paradise is the master plan, and everything else is just a reflection of that master plan of all the creator sons trying to match it up, right? Okay.
So that tells me that there's electrons, atoms, neutrons in paradise.
Yeah, everything that's in the physical is here 10 times, right? So if there's 100 elements in the world, in our world, then there's 1,000 elements in paradise, 10 times as much. Okay. So we got like 1/10 of what you'd actually see or feel and do in paradise. Okay, so let's go into this first paragraph. This is all Jesus speaking. I changed it to red to back to the orange so everyone could see it a little bit better tonight and be easier to read.
Yeah, the orange is good.
Yeah, seems to work out better. All right, the source of universe reality is the infinite. That's God the Father. The material things of finite creation are the time-space repercussions of the paradise pattern and the universal mind of the eternal God. Who's the universal mind? The infinite spirit, right? That's the universal mind. So that's the universal mind of the eternal God is the infinite spirit. Causation in the physical world, everything that happens in the physical world, self-consciousness in the intellectual world, and progressing selfhood in the spirit world, these realities projected on a universe scale throughout all 7 super universes combine in eternal relatedness and experience with perfection of quality and divinity of value constitutes the reality of the supreme. So what Jesus just explained is all these things and the experiences of the finite worlds and universes goes into the experience of the supreme, and that's what actually constitute the real value of the supreme itself. But in an ever-changing universe, the original personality of causation, God's personality circuit, intelligent and spirit experience is changeless, absolute. So the personality of God does not change. It always stays the same. And that's why that thought adjuster within you does not change also. All things, even in the eternal universe of limitless values and divine qualities, may and often does, oftentimes do, change except the absolute and that which has attained the physical status, intellectual embrace, or spiritual identity, which is absolute. So once anything reaches these absolute values, both physical, spiritual, intellectual, mindful, when these things reach the spiritual identity of God the Father, then that is absolute and that is changeless. Now, another thing we need to mention here, that includes human personality. Human personality grows, but it's changeless in the divinity of its origination. Okay, so your personality that's given to you by God's base does not change, but your experience in that personality grows and changes constantly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the God part doesn't change, only the personality part of the human. Okay? A lot in that little paragraph, isn't there?
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, let's go on to the next one. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Yes. The highest level to which a finite creature can progress is the recognition of the universal Father and the knowing of the Supreme. And even then, such beings of finality, destiny, go on experiencing change in the motions of the physical world and in its material phenomena. Likewise, do they remain aware of selfhood, progression, and their continuing ascension of the spiritual universe and of growing consciousness in their deepening appreciation of and response to the intellectual cosmos. Only in the perfection, harmony, and unanimity,
Yeah.
unanimity of will can the creature become as one with the Creator, and such a state of divinity is attained and maintained only by the creature's continuing to live in time and eternity by consistently conforming his finite personal will to the divine will of the Creator. Always must the desire to do the Father's will be supreme in the soul and dominant over the mind of an ascending Son of God.
Okay, this paragraph is so important. I could spend the rest of the night on this. Just
No
this
kidding.
one paragraph. Okay, so let's kind of break this down a little bit the way we used to in our 26-week course, right? All right, so let's start at the beginning of it. It says here that the finite person can progress in the recognition of the universal Father and the knowing of the Supreme. Now, how is that possible? If the finite creature progresses recognizing the universal Father more and more in their own personal life, they're adding their experience to the Supreme, and that gives you a higher awareness of the Supreme Being itself.
Correct.
Okay? All right. And even though we live and experience changes, things in the physical world and the material phenomena around us, this selfhood progression of ourself continuously adds to the ascension of our spiritual nature in the universe. So the more we do the Father's will, the more we add to the spiritual nature of the universe. And we're going to come to find out that the spiritual universe and the finite universe are not separate. They're intertwined. You cannot have a finite being without a spiritual intersection with the finite and the spiritual. In other words, I'm saying this: you can't have a scientific world, a finite world, and a spiritual world that's separate. These are not separate concepts, because if you tear them apart separately, they have no meaning and value. The only way you get meaning and value in the finite world is to intertwine it with the spiritual world. And the spiritual should always be dominant. So if saying that, what I'm saying is this: there is no science without a spiritual world. Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Why would you say there is no science without a spiritual
You would
world?
think
Because
physical.
the physical world and the scientific world is not reality until you give it spiritual meaning. So you can run around this finite world and come up with all these theories and all this science and all this stuff on your own, try to make yourself really intelligent and a genius, and it means absolutely nothing without the spiritual intervention in the whole process. Okay, so you're living in what? An unreality existence. And when you die, that existence dies with you. Okay? Now, what's the difference between the spiritual and the scientific when you mix them together? When you die, you take the finite with you. You take the experience of the finite with you. Your reality in the finite becomes your new reality in the Morontia and eventually the spiritual. You can't separate the two. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it goes on to tell us, this is Jesus talking now. I want to keep iterating this. This is lessons from Jesus, right? He says here, only in the perfection and harmony, you see that word harmony, and unanimity of will can the creature become one with the Creator. So it's only by giving in to this will of God and making God's will your will can that creature become one with the Creator and attain a state of a divinity and continue to live on in time and eternity. Without that connection with God the Father, what happens? You cease to exist. Okay? That's why fusion with the adjuster is so, so important. So making his will your will, you not only lock yourself into eternity, but you lock yourself into divinity from that point on also. All right. And then his last statement here is this: always must the desire to do the Father's will be supreme in the soul and dominant over the mind of an ascending Son of God. That's why everything in this finite world is about doing the Father's will, not running around doing whatever you want to do. Okay? Now, this is Jesus saying this. This is not me. Okay? So this is, you got to keep them in. This is mine. This is Jesus teaching. All right? What I say don't mean nothing. What he says means everything. All right. Pam, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah. A one-eyed person can never hope to visualize depth of perspective.
No.
Neither can single-eyed material scientists, nor single-eyed spiritual mystics and allegorists correctly visualize and adequately comprehend the true depths of universe reality. All true values of creature experience are concealed in depth of recognition.
Okay. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm going to lower this so I can get Diane a view over her. Her computer just went out. Can you see that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay. All right. So, what's Jesus telling us here? That if you are single-eyed, you have one eyeball to look out into the universe. All the rest stuff the same, the other eyeball is picking up, you don't see. Okay? You become a wide-eyed person, you can't visualize depth perception. So the scientist, if he has one single view towards science, he's missed the depth of his own universe and perception because he's cut off the whole spiritual side of his vision. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. So you can only visualize and adequately comprehend the reality of the universe by what? Having depth of perception. Now,
Good.
you want to hear an interesting thing about this? You could say, well, what about people that's lost one eye? They're not talking about that. They're talking about the depth of perception of the spiritual and the scientific, the material at the same time. And you only need one eye to do that. You with me?
For both, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't say if you only have one eye, you don't understand it. What they're giving you is an example how your depth of perception changes when you add both parts of the field. Okay?
Mhm.
All right. Well, we have 4 of us, don't we? Diane is back up, and you will not be able to see her, just hear her. Okay?
Okay.
Mindless causation cannot evolve the refined and complex from the crude and the simple. Neither can spiritless experience evolve the divine characters of eternal survival from the material minds of the mortals of time. The one attribute of the universe which so exclusively characterizes the infinite deity is his unending creative bestowal of personality, which can survive in progressive deity attainment.
Okay. So basically, because of the gift of the personality from God, okay, you go from a mindless causation. In other words, you just go through experiences in your life, one right after other, and it doesn't mean anything. It's because of the personality that's been given you from God that you have this complex look at the universes of time and space. Okay, and it's because of this personality bestowal that Jesus has given you, it can mix with the thought adjuster, and that can give you something other than mindless causation. In other words, walking through life without any meaning or value to your life. You think that's important?
Yeah.
It is, right? You want to have meaning for your life. That's why they keep having those three things throughout the book over and over again. All right. Personality is that cosmic endowment, that phase of universal reality that can coexist with unlimited change and at the same time retain its identity in the very presence of all such changes forever afterward. So God has given you a personality straight from Him that allows you to retain everything that you learn, feel, and do, and add that to consecutive lives in the future, the Morancha lives, and then the spiritual lives, and eventually the Absonite lives and the absolute life, right? All those lives, that same personality just keeps adding to and adding to and adding to, and that's because of that fusion with the thought adjuster. So, do you think it's important to do the will of God? I would say so, wouldn't you?
Yes.
All right, let's keep going. Rodney.
Life is an adaptation of the original cosmic causation and the demands and possibilities of universe situations, and it comes into being by the action of the universal mind and the activation of the spirit spark of the God who is spirit. The meaning of life is its adaptability. The value of life is its progressibility, even to the heights of God consciousness.
Okay, so because we are plugged in to the universal mind, now how do we plug into the universal mind? The local universe mother spirit. Okay, the mind circuit. That's how we plug in. Now, as we get past the Morancha lives and go into the spiritual life, we get plugged directly into the universal mind circuit. Okay, and all this happens because the local universe mother spirit gives us that spark of life, and that spark of life is not physical, believe it or not. What is it? It's spiritual. So that spark of life that makes you start, makes you who you are, makes those little babies inside the womb get started, is that spark of life. And that is a spiritual spark, not a finite spark. Okay? All right. And it's because of that spark, which is spirit, it gives you your life itself an adaptability and a progressibility that allows you to climb the steps one by one and even to the height of God consciousness and standing before God the Father. Now, you see why this is important, that what Jesus taught us?
Yes.
I mean, this is not stuff he taught the apostles in the New Testament, is it?
Right.
None of this stuff is in the New Testament. If you can go look for it all day long, you're not going to find it. All right. And one of the most important things he taught us. All right. Pam, would you take the next one?
Misadaptation of self-conscious life to the universe results in cosmic disharmony. Final divergence of personality will from the trend of the universes terminates in intellectual isolation, personality segregation.
They call that cosmic insanity, don't they, Pam?
Sounds like Lucifer.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
right.
Loss of the indwelling spirit pilot supervenes in spiritual cessation of existence. Intelligent and progressing life becomes then, in and of itself, an
Good. Yeah, incontrovertible.
yeah, proof of the existence of a purposeful
Yeah.
universe expressing the will of a divine creator. And this life, in the aggregate, struggles towards higher values, having for its final goal the universal Father.
Do you think he could say anything more important? No,
No.
he really couldn't. All right, so let's start out with the beginning of this, like with the others we talked about tonight. Misadaptation of self-conscious, cosmic suicide, when you decide that there is no God, that you don't want to go along with the universe program the way it is, you step into that realm of cosmic insanity. Okay. And I don't know if I think that I got that from the Urantia book, but I know it's a phrase I've used over and over again when we talk about Lucifer. It's just cosmically insane because it says right here, Jesus tells us it terminates in intellectual isolation and personality segregation. So you start living in a life that is not reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not real anymore.
It's outside
So when,
of reality.
yeah, it's outside of reality. So Lucifer and all those beings that followed him into rebellion stepped in non-reality. And that's the important point here. They went from a real universe and a process that works to an unreal process and something that is not within God the Father. And we know nothing lives, breathes, and has its being outside God the Father, does it? So just knowing that should tell you not to do that. Okay.
Mhm.
Can you, I know I came late and I apologize, but can you give me a quick synopsis, I guess? Because you kind of lost me.
Okay.
We,
Gary, two things tonight. When you read and we talk tonight, everybody's going to end up in shorts tonight. We're gonna end up in these short little broadcasts I've been making because these paragraphs are Jesus teaching Gained. He was 17 years old. He only probably absorbed about 5%. But this information we're talking about is the 26-week course I taught twice, once in 2013 and once last year. Okay. The whole book, the 179-page book I just finished, it's all about these paragraphs right here that Jesus is teaching us. So this is an overview of the reality or the origins and history of universe reality concisely told by Jesus himself. So these paragraphs are not anywhere else to be found. They're not in the New Testament. They're not in the Old Testament. This is Jesus teaching us about what is real and what's not. That's where we are, Gary. And so when we get done tonight, you can go back and go to the podcast because it'll be out there immediately and go through the first three or four paragraphs because it'll give you a background of all this up to this. So this is a rehash of the 26-week course we did, when we spent 26 weeks together going through all the papers of the book on this information. It really came from Jesus here.
Yeah, I realized that. I recognized it, but it wasn't clicking mentally. So I'll go back.
Yeah, all the stuff sounds so familiar. It's because all the stuff that he's teaching is in the forward, the first couple papers on God the Father, paper 11, paper 107, and 106. All those papers this is a condensation of all those papers, really.
Okay.
Okay, so go back and listen to the beginning. It might help you understand this a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so let's go on from where I was. The loss of the indwelling spirit. All right, the pilot, the spirit pilot's what they're talking about. If you lose that spiritual pilot, which is God the Father, right? The thought adjuster. If you lose that, what does it say here? It says in spiritual succession of existence. So if you lose that pilot, you lose your own existence in the universe. You cease to exist. There is no hell. You cease to exist because you can't have beings that are non-real, non-reality, living in a universe that is real. Okay? They don't mix. There is no good and evil that's equal. They're not equal forces. They never have been. Evil is a misadaptation of life, and sin is when you knowingly rebel against God the Father or your brothers or sisters, okay? And that ends in cessation of life, all right? And then he goes on to tell us, this is Jesus talking in all these, Gary. All this orange is Jesus talking. I changed them from red to orange so we could read it tonight, all right? Then it goes on to tell us that intelligent and progressing life then becomes itself its own proof of existence in the universe, the expressing of the will of the divine creator. All right, so what he's trying to tell us is the proof of life is the existence of the will of God within you. Without the will of God within you, you have no life. You're living in non-reality. And in normal places, this is called what? Insanity. And in this case, it's called cosmic insanity, because you're not only insane in the finite world, you're insane in the spiritual world as well. Okay? You still with me, everybody?
Yes.
All right. And then he goes on to tell us that the final goal in life is what? The universal Father. So as we grow as finite beings, our final goal throughout all eternity is standing before the universal Father and physically meeting the spiritual essence of the Father himself. I knew this was going to be a tough one tonight. Okay, Gary, would you take the next one since you had
Showed up
chance?
late. I know.
Showed
Do
up
my
late.
penance.
That's all right.
Only in degree does man possess mind above the animal level, aside from the higher and quasi-spiritual ministrations of intel. Therefore, animals, not having worship and wisdom, cannot experience the superconsciousness, the consciousness of consciousnesses. The animal mind is only conscious of the objective universe.
So it's only human beings on higher levels that can understand the higher and quasi-spiritual manifestation of their intellects. So the animals, therefore, that's why there is no worship and wisdom, the last two of the seven adjutants in animals, it's not there because they can't experience super consciousness. They can't experience a consciousness of themselves, a consciousness of consciousness. Okay? And their conscious is only attached to the universe around them that's happening. And it's the same way when we get to the mansion worlds, when we meet these creatures that take care of the yards, fix the food, that do all these things that don't have souls. They might live on for hundreds of thousands of years, but they don't have souls because they don't have any consciousness of spiritual values or intellect. They only have consciousness of what's going on around them right now. They have no conscious of time and space. Okay, so as far as my cats are concerned, or anything animal world, they are conscious of right now. They have no consciousness of the future, no consciousness of the past, even though they remember things in the past. They don't have a consciousness of it. They're experiencing life right now, this moment. So when your cat or dog crawls up on your lap and is loving you, he is thinking about nothing else but loving you that moment. They're attached to you. Okay? They're not sub-attached at all. They are wholeheartedly there with you in that moment because their only consciousness is right this minute. They don't think about what's coming for supper. They don't think about what they're going to do tomorrow. They don't think about if another animal's going to chase them. They're just concerned with what's going on right now, this moment. And my cat right now thinks he sees a shadow, so he's conscious of that moment that he's chasing the shadow. Does that make sense? So that's how the animal mind is different than the human mind. And that's okay because there's billions of animals that are that way. And we're going to interact with billions of animals more as we go through the mansion worlds and go through the spiritual life. Okay? I guarantee it. Okay. Let's see here. Diane, you're up next again. Okay.
Knowledge is a sphere of the material or fact discerning mind. Truth is a domain of the spiritually endowed intellect that is conscious of knowing God. Knowledge is demonstrable. Truth is experience. Knowledge is a possession of the mind. Truth and experience of the soul. The progressing self. Knowledge is a function of the non-spiritual level. Truth is a phase of the mind-spirit level of the universes. The eye of the material mind perceives a world of factual knowledge. The eye of the spiritualized intellect discerns a world of true values. These two views, synchronized and harmonized, reveal the world of reality, wherein wisdom interprets the phenomena of the universe in terms of progressive personal experience.
Okay, so you see how knowledge, the fact or material discerning mind, is different than truth. Okay, so you can gain knowledge, you can become the smartest individual in the world. Okay, if you have no truth in your training, in your intellectual learning of your mind, you're an idiot. Okay, there's no way around it. You're an idiot, because if you do not have the truth side, you are like that one-eyed person. You only see one side of the picture, and you will never connect the two sides to make a reality that is real ever. So as long as you're stupid, and I do mean stupid, you're going to stick with that scientific approach that has no spiritual meaning or value. But if you're smart, your intellect has kicked in, you will always associate everything physical with the spiritual value with it. Okay? That's the way it works, because if you don't, you're living outside of reality. All right? Right here it says knowledge is demonstrable. What does that mean? In other words, knowledge you can demonstrate. You know, you can do something, and the fact is you'll have a result from it, right? But truth can only be experienced. There is nothing called abstract truth. Truth is real and of itself. It is not abstract. Okay, and knowledge, which is the possession of the mind to learn something, all right, but truth is an experience of the soul. Why is it an experience of the soul, y'all? Because it involves the thought adjuster, doesn't it? If you have truth, then the thought adjuster gets involved, and that truth adds to the experience of the soul so that when you die, you will take that truth with you. It won't fall off the scaffolding in the world, right? All right, and Jesus also goes on to tell us that knowledge is a function of the non-spiritual level. In other words, just learning stuff is not spiritual, is it? All right, you have to have the spiritual part. Truth is a phase of the mind spirit level of the universe. So if you learn something with truth, it will stay with you forever throughout time. But the information you learn that had nothing to do with truth, do you think you're going to remember it in 100 years? It becomes non-useful. All right.
You just told me why so many religious scholars are the way they are. I guess that's the way to say it. What I have often wondered, people who have studied the Bible and all these world religions, and they don't seem to be spiritual.
Because
And
they didn't make that connection, Gary, right?
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You are a smarter man than I am.
No, I've just studied it more. That's all. All right. Let's go on with this because Jesus says the eye of the material mind perceives a world of factual
No,
knowledge. That's it. The eye of the spiritualized intellect becomes a world of true value. So if you look at things just through the material perception or mind, then you gain no value in what you've learned. Is that understandable?
correct.
All right. But if you look through it through the spiritual aspect, then you gain true values that you will carry with you forever. And then Jesus says these two synchronize and harmonize, reveal the world of reality, the real world of reality, not just the experience reality, but the real world. And it says therein wisdom interprets the phenomena of the universe in terms of progressive personal experience. So your own personal experience is saved in your soul so that when you wake up on the mansion world, you still have every bit of it. Okay? All right, we got 15 more minutes. I'm going to try to get through this really important one here next. All right, so Rodney, would you read this so that I can harp
Yes.
on?
Can't believe time went by so fast.
I know.
Error or evil is the penalty of imperfection. The qualities of imperfection or facts of misadaptation are disclosed on the material level by critical observation and by scientific analysis. On the moral level, by human experience. The presence of evil constitutes proof of the inaccuracies of mind and the immaturity of the evolving self. Evil is, therefore, also a measure of imperfection in universe interpretation. The possibility of making mistakes is inherent in the accusation of wisdom. The scheme of progressing from the partial and temporal to the complete and eternal, from the relative and imperfect to the final and perfected. Error is the shadow of relative incompleteness, which must, of necessity, fall across man's ascending universe path to paradise perfection. Error, evil, is not an actual universe quality. It is simply the observation of a relativity
Relativity, yeah.
and the relatedness of the imperfection of the incomplete finite to the ascending levels of the supreme and ultimate.
Okay, and we've studied both the supreme and ultimate, haven't we? Okay, the experiential gods. Okay, let's start at the beginning of this. I want to break down everything Jesus says here. I want us to get the full amount of what he's telling us. All right. Okay. Evil being the penalty of imperfection. Number one, evil is not equal with good, is it?
Correct.
Never has been, never will be. So there's not a evil universe around you that's just opposed to a good universe around you. There's not an equal evil and an equal good. Okay? Equal evil is an error. Error is the misadaptation of the penalty of imperfection. In other words, evil is there because we are not yet what? Perfect.
Perfect.
That's right. When we get to paradise, there will be no evil, will there? Because everything is perfect. Okay? So it tells us that the qualities of imperfection or facts of misadaptation are disclosed on the material level by critical observation and by what? Scientific analysis of evil. Scientific analysis of the moral level and the human experience. When you do something evil, what is the result? It's a scientific analysis. If you do this, this happens. If you do this, something else happens. If you do good, you're in line with the universe, so you don't get penalized by doing good. Make sense? But the evil, you have to get corrected. All right? And Jesus tells us here that the presence of evil constitutes the proof of the inaccuracies of the mind and the maturity of the evolving self. So because when we choose evil, it's because we refuse to make the right moral decisions and follow the will of the thought adjuster. So we have to make misadaptation changes to become more perfect. All right. But these things are necessary in the universe climb for the acquisition of wisdom, because if you don't
Correct.
if you don't experience these things, you never have the opportunity to grow in wisdom, because you learn why you don't want to do evil as opposed to good, right?
Call on the job training.
It's called on the job training. That's right. It's the experience from it, right? And he goes on to tell us that this scheme of progressing from the partial and temporal, that's the world right now we're in, the finite. It's partial and temporal, okay? To the complete and eternal, which is what we climb up through the Maraja to the spiritual levels, right? From the relative to and imperfect to the final and perfected. So it's a progression all the way up to perfection, okay? And he tells us here that error or misadaptation, evil, is relative to the incompleteness of the world we live in, and it must fall across our career as ascenders on our path to paradise perfection, so that we can gain wisdom and learn from it. If these things didn't happen, we would always be stupid, right? That's just the way it is. He goes on to tell us, this is the interesting part. Error or evil is not actually a universe quality. What does that tell us? If it's not a universe quality, then there's no way in God's green earth that it could be equal with good, is it?
That's void of quality.
It's void of quality. So it's really non-existent. It's just the error of us making mistakes of our way. All right. And he tells us right after this, It's the observation of relativity to the relatedness of the imperfection of the incomplete finite. It's the result from us being finite and our thoughts being incomplete, our manner of following God's will is incomplete. So we will always have evil in our world as long as we live around other stupid human beings that are reacting to evil and doing evil and making wrong choices, right? That's just the way it is, all right? And it's this imperfection and the incomplete of the finite that lets us climb the levels of experience for the supreme and the ultimate. So when we finally get to the ultimate, we should be smart cookies, shouldn't we? I mean, we should have learned something because of the experience. Boy, I beat that one to death, didn't I?
Phew.
All right. Did you just read, Rodney?
I did.
Gary, would you take this last one there?
Although Jesus told all this to the lad in language best suited to his comprehension, at the end of the discussion, Ganid was heavy of eye and was soon lost in slumber. They rose early the next morning to go aboard the boat bound for Lasea on the island of Crete. But before they embarked, the lad had still further questions to ask about evil, to which Jesus replied, "Go to sleep."
Go to sleep. That's right. Basically. All right, let me see where I am. Okay, 3 more paragraphs. I don't think we can get through this, but before the end of the night, let's give it a shot. We got a couple more things here. All right. First one, dear, would you take the first one?
Okay. Evil is a relativity concept. It arises out of the observation of the imperfections which appear in the shadow cast by a finite universe of things and beings as such a cosmos
Obscures
the living light of the universal expression of the eternal realities of the infinite one.
Okay, so evil is only relative to this world or the worlds that are experiencing things on their way to paradise, right? It's a relativity concept in the fact that it's not real and it won't always be there. It's only on the way to find the infinite one himself, all right? Potential evil is inherent in the necessary incompleteness of the revelation of God as a time-space limited expression of infinity and eternity. In other words, this is all has to do with time and space. When we get out of the time and space area and we get to paradise, it's no longer there. The fact of the partial and the presence in the completeness constitutes relativity of reality. In other words, it's not really real. Creates necessity for intellectual choosing and establishes value levels of spirit recognition and response. It's there for us to recognize and to respond against it and make the right choices. The incomplete and finite concept of the infinite, which is held by the temporal and limited creature mind, is in and of itself potential evil. If you let it go by yourself and you don't make the proper decisions, that itself can be a potential evil. But the augmenting error of unjustified deficiency in reasonable spiritual rectification of these originally inherent intellectual disharmonies and spiritual insufficiency is equivalent to the realization of actual evil. So you can allow yourself to go down this evil pathway, and as long as you keep choosing those things along that evil pathway, they will bring themselves into fruition as living in an evil life. Okay? All right. Rodney, would you take this last one for tonight?
Yes. All static, dead concepts are potentially evil. The finite shadow of relative and living truth is continually moving. Static concepts invariably retard science, politics, society, and religion. Static concepts may represent a certain knowledge, but they are deficient in wisdom and devoid of truth. But do not permit the concept of relativity to mislead you, so to mislead you that you fail to recognize the coordination of the universe under the guidance of the cosmic mind and its stabilized control by the energy and spirit of the Supreme.
Is he talking about the relativity concept by Einstein? Yes.
Yeah,
That is
that's
what
I
he's
thought.
talking about here, right?
Kidding.
He's also talking about the static and dead concepts of the church. They aren't growing.
That's right.
Religion continuously develops and grows. It's a moving object. It's not
living.
static. It does not stay in the same place all the time. My concepts of religion 50 years ago are totally different and sometimes opposite of my concepts of religion and philosophy now, because it grows over time. So if you find an old film of me somewhere saying this and that and the other, I was probably wrong because I was growing, right? That's the way it is. And so to fail to understand this, that under the guidance of the cosmic mind, we can control energy and spirit and the Supreme and all these concepts of relativity that Einstein came up with, and he knew it wasn't 100% right, but he could not relate these things to us. Why? Because we were too stupid to understand them. Okay? That's what it boils down to. When you have a true genius, it's hard for them to relate these facts to us. Now, next time we're going to take up on the island of Crete. Let me go over here and stop the share, and I think I'll do the prayer of acceptance myself tonight, since I'm already out of breath. Prayer of acceptance. This is what we believe as a group. I believe that God is my paradise Father, and only by faith am I saved. No sacrifice is necessary. By this same faith, I became a child of God and know that all men and women are my brothers and sisters. We know the Son of God, the sovereign of our universe of Nebadon, as Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. By allowing the will of God to become my will, I will someday stand in the presence of the Paradise Father. In the name of Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. And we made it before 7 o'clock. I can't believe it. Miracles never cease in my life.
Just call me Miracle Boy because I shut up.
You did good, Gary. Any questions before we sign off? We got 1 minute. You got a 1 minute question?
No.
That was good.
All right. Thanks everyone out there for joining us. I know it was a difficult one tonight. I hope you gained something from it. And please come see us again next time. We'll be back on
Roger.
Thursday. You're welcome, Ron. All right. We will see you then, everybody.
Good night.
Love you guys.